This is Grandma Starr, and I was born October 14, 1935. That was the year of the Depression. And when I was born, I was born in a home, in my parents' home, no hospital. There was no electricity, there was no TVs, there were no cell phones, and there were no inside bathrooms. For fun things that we did, at Christmas time there were so many of us that we just drew names among ourselves for presents. We also got presents from Santa Claus, however. And then one of my most traumatic things when I was, because we lived in the country at this time, was that I was home alone babysitting with my little sister, and I think I was about, the sister was a baby and I was about 8 years old, and the neighborhood, that man went insane, and he rode his horse up into the yard, tied it up to the post, walked right into the house, and just started saying crazy things, and I was so scared. And I didn't want him to harm the baby, but he just kept walking through the house and looking out the window and just saying crazy things. So I grabbed the baby and went into the back bedroom and wrapped her up and was going to go out the back door and try to find a place to hide. And while I was doing that, he left. So that was kind of crazy. And then I went to a country schoolhouse, the first and second grade. It was a one-room schoolhouse. Then we moved into town, so then I went to school in town for the rest of my schooling years. I graduated from high school in 1953, and the first year out of high school, because we had a course in teaching that I could do this, my first year out of high school, I taught school in a country school, and I had to stay with the neighbors because I had no car to drive. So I got $200 a month for teaching, and out of that $30 went to my room and board, because I was staying with a family that was about a half a mile from the school. And then I had to walk to school every day and walk home. When you were a teacher, then you taught all 8 grades, and you also did your own janitor work and so forth. So you had it all to do. After I taught 1 year, I was married in June of 1954, and we moved on the home place and started to farm, and it was in those really dry years in '55. We didn't think we could make it on the farm, so we moved to Sioux City, and Ron bought a business. And I was a stay-at-home mom, which I'm very grateful for. And we had 5 kids and 23 foster kids. And when the kids were all grown, why, I started to teach ESL, that's English as a Second Language. That's to all foreign-born adults, and I enjoyed that, very much. And that is up to now. I want to go back to one thing in my childhood that I remember very much, is that I lived with my grandma quite a bit of the time, and her best friend's grandbaby died at birth. And they had 4 little girls as pallbearers. They asked me to be one, and we all had to wear little white dresses and walk along with that tiny little casket. One thing that we were all girls, so we played house a lot. We played school. We all liked ball, so we played ball an awful lot. And when our cousins came from South Dakota and over, we played ball continuously. We just liked ball. I don't remember of any special toys because we didn't get a lot of toys. Well, one of the favorite things in my whole life that I've ever done is raise kids. I loved raising kids. And one of my friends, Pat, had foster kids. And I especially like babies, newborn babies. And at that time, I took the 19 babies from the mothers didn't keep them, and then before they would be adopted out, that interim time, they put the babies in foster homes, and then they were adopted out. I had 19 from the Florence Crittenden home, and from then on, I just decided to. Then we got Holly, and I decided to take some little bit older ones, and I had toddlers, and I had a teenage boy and a teenage girl too. Well, they were all, of course, when I did that, they were all in school when I would start taking foster babies. But yes, they they love kids and people, and so they had no problem with it at all. Well, I'm very glad that I got to live during this time, because I can remember my Grandma Hanson telling a story about when she was a little girl, the family butchered the meat, and she took they asked her to take the fresh liver over to the neighbors. So as she was going over the fields to the neighbors, the wolves started coming in on her because they smelled the meat. She threw it down and ran back home. So from that very long ago time until I have seen them to be able to get to the moon, it's been quite a time of invention. I think I especially enjoyed it when we got bathrooms in the house.
Ronald L. Nielsen. I was born in Newcastle, Nebraska on a farm, and that was October 17th of 1934. My life growing up was tough. Before I even knew I was only 2 years old, my grandpa was dying down here in the hospital.
Wow.
And he said, when he was dying, he said, "Who's going with me?" And my dad said, "Well, nobody." And when he got down, after he passed away, they got called, and their sister had died having a baby. And the same day, and the funerals were the same day. And this is the way I am, because I'm very tender-hearted, and I had a great life. My folks were great to me. When I went to school to start I was in a little school that went 1 to 8, one room. We had a pot-belly stove in the basement with a grate upstairs, and we would circle the wagons, we called it, because that was our chairs, and desk when it was so cold we couldn't do it. And so that is how I started my education. But one thing you want to remember, on a farm, we worked. When I was just a little guy, about 10 years old, I had my cows to milk. I did 3 cows in the morning before I went to school. And then I would ride my horse. We had a barn at school. And I'd ride my horse and put it in the barn, and then I'd go to school. And then afterwards, I'd saddle back up, go home. I had to take care of the chickens and milk my 3 cows. And then it was night. But we did eat good. My folks always had something for us to eat. I remember that very strong. And when you go on through your life, one of the things I remember when I was young, I might have been 11 years old, my dad had me cultivate a team of horses and a 1-row cultivator. And I tell you, my legs were so sore from holding those shanks in to get the dirt around the corn. And also I did the planting the same way. I had 2 horses, 1 row. And that was my biggest experience when I first started farming with my dad, or working with Dad on the farm. When I was a little guy, going back, when I was a little guy, we lived in a town about 3 miles from Olbert. And that's where I was really raised for about 3 years. My folks seemed to think they couldn't trust me. I don't know why, but when I went outside, they put a rope around me and tied me to a tree. And actually, when I run away, they said that I was under the cellar door sleeping. And they couldn't find me, and they had all the neighbors looking in the cornfields and everything. And from that day on, I had a rope around me when I was outside alone. And when I went to town, I had a harness. And my mother would have me or my dad, one of us would take us. So that is how I was raised. Such a nice little boy. My mother had a nervous breakdown, and so I had to live when I was about 4 years old with a neighbor. And I loved her very much, but she closed the screen door on my cat right behind the head and killed it. And I always hollered, "Opie-doo, Opie-doo." And I said that was one of my big experiences. The first thing, seeing death with livestock, or with my pets and that. As I grew older, I was about 12, 13. I started doing my brother was sick, so I did most of the work with my dad. I was running the combine. We shocked oats. I don't know if anybody knows what that means, but they were in bundles, and we put them up in a kind of a hut-like, and then we would thrash them. The neighbors would all get together, and Dad owned the thrash machine, and so we would do all the thrashing, and they would all come together, and whoever we was doing it for, we would eat at that place. They had to furnish the food, and we'd have lunch in the morning, and lunch in the afternoon, and a big dinner at noon. That went on, and Dad was sick, and he had to take a little time off, so I was 14 years old, and I run the thrash machine. I was the head man. The kid run it. We had a good time. The other thing that was so good about it was I learned a lot. I knew a lot of things, and when I became a little older, I could do a lot of things. I did electrical, I did plumbing, whatever the farm needed, because we never had any of that when I was just a little boy. We had to go outside, and we had an outside toilet, and we had to take a lantern with us because Dad wouldn't trust us with a candle. And so that was some of the things. Now, you talk about growing up. When I was small, Mom washed all our clothes with a brush, like she took a brush and she worked it back and forth on a piece of that worked on it to clean it. The first year my sister taught school, she took the money and bought Mom a wash machine. The second check she got, she bought Mom a gas engine to run the washing machine. And so we were really swinging high. We could start that up and she could wash with the machine. I remember when Pearl Harbor was bombed, I was laying on the floor because nobody had anything but a radio. And lucky if you had a radio. And we listened to it, all of us gathered around it, and we were all very concerned. And even me at 6, I was concerned. I knew what that meant. So then I grew and I started going to school, and I got out of grade school, went into a high school, and I got out of high school. After I got out of high school, when I just finished high school, I got on the Obert ball team. I had a uniform I thought was pretty big, but I wasn't really very good. But I was right with the team, and we all worked together. We used to go after the game to Newcastle. Very exciting town. Dirt streets, wood sidewalks, and mud. When it rained and stormed, it mud all over. But I went to Newcastle. We did that all the time in the summertime. I've heard of the Bilers. There was a bunch of them, I was told. And I seen Starr, but I never went with her. But one of the things, before we get into that, I want to say, when I went to town when I was a little boy, Dad gave me a quarter. I could go to the movies, I could have popcorn, and I could buy me a comic book. And that's where my quarter went. One of the things that till I got married, we had no pop in our house. Not one canned bottle or anything. We had Watkins products, and they would buy grape and they'd buy orange, and we could make our drink. But that was as much as we ever spent. We were hard up. Mom would do the cooking. We carried the flour and the sugar in 100-pound bags that we put upstairs for she could cook, because we never know when it was going to get out of there. I mean, the roads were bad. They'd never seen a blacktop road within 4 miles of our place. So that brings me back to Newcastle. And I kept doing that for a while. I rode around. I had some dates with girls. Nothing exciting. I mean, none of them very good. But when my grandma stayed at my house, we took care of her for about 4 years, and this is toward the end before I got married. She would always, I could come home and I could get in that house and I could go to bed and nobody knew by the time I got home. But Grandma did. I could open that door and here she comes. Shuffles all the time. And she'd say, "Ronald, is that you?" "Yeah, Grandma, it's me. Where you been this late?" "Oh, Grandma, I had this little Catholic girl and she was so cute." "Ronald, you don't go Catholic girls. You're Baptist." And let me tell you, when I was young, I was Baptist. Evening Sunday, Wednesday evening. Every other Friday night we had BYU. It's the youth of the church. I was baptized when I was 12 years old, immersed. A true Baptist, because you don't see a true Baptist if he hasn't been immersed. That's the way it was. Now back to getting close to being married. Not married, Bobby. Her oldest sister, Starr's oldest sister, taught our school out there. And they were hard to get teachers and everything, and Dad said yes, she could stay at our place. So right away I had an in. She says to me, you want a date?" And I says, "Well, what are you talking about?" "Well, I got a couple sisters I know would love to go out with you. If you take me to Newcastle, I'll get you a date." So here we go to Newcastle. This is back in about 51. I went in there and out of the door comes my lovely Starr. I think we hit it off pretty good with Bobby helping. We went to movies, we did things, and then I'd come home and pick up Bobby, drop Starr off, and take Bobby back to my house. This went on for about a year, because Bobby taught out there a year. I never went with any other girls. I don't know if Starr went with me. We weren't engaged or anything. We had a long relationship, but I knew I loved her. And she was a good Christian girl. Grandma would approve of her. So anyhow, it became about February 14th of 1953, we become engaged to be married. And we were married June 15th of 54. We had a lot of trips since we got married. We did a lot of things. We had a lot of hardship. We worked hard. I had a business, and that took me 7 days a week, 1 week, 6 days the next. And that was nights and everything. We did that for about 4 or 5 years, and then I bought another business, and it was a little better business, a little bigger business, and I didn't have to do quite as much that. So that was on the time we had, Kim was born on the farm. Starr saved the money from the milking and eggs to pay the hospital bill, which was $10 a day at that time, I believe. And we got that handled, and Rhonda come along a couple of years later. And then we bought a house over on Morningside, a little one. And that was our first home we owned in anywheres. We lived there for about 3 or 4 years. Then we bought a house that was only about 2 years old, but it was small. 3-bedroom, and it was about 1,100 square feet, which is kind of things, more things than you really want to know. But the thing that I look at as the future went on with the people I got involved with after I went out of the oil business. The oil business was not good. Texaco sold me the whole thing and then pulled out 2 years later, and I couldn't get a supplier, so that ended that. I was lucky enough to go for Ben Fish. I worked 5 years for Ben Fish. I drew big money. I was his top dog man. We did travel. He paid for a trip for Starr and me and the 3 kids to Florida, or Hawaii, not Florida, Hawaii. And we had another trip that he paid for. We went to Puerto Rico, Starr and me, and they paid all our expenses. And then in 1985, I went to work for a company called Tire Associates. And I got in with them. I started low, worked my way back up. I got in with them, made big money. And I got involved with Armstrong Tire real good. And they made sure that I and Starr was at all their banquets and everything in June. We always had the Super Bowl banquets. And Starr and me went, and it was all paid for. We paid nothing. We had a great time. I was invited 1 year to sit at the president's table for dinner. I was very honored. We had a lot of other things. We did a lot of crazy things. We have a great family. We had Kurt come along in 62. We adopted Holly in 71, and we adopted Joe in 74. So we had a lot of family. We no doubt would have adopted more if they'd have come along. Our hearts were big, our pockets were empty, but we had a lot of fun. And I think that's about winds us down. I think the film must be running out. One of the things that I want to explain is how it started so little and everything got so big. I used horses when I was a kid to put the corn in the ground. Now they got tractors and they got planters that go 25 feet out. And they got combines that combine 16 rows or 24 rows. I mean, this world has gotten so much bigger. My little tractor when I was farming would pull 2 plows. And now they don't even plow. They chisel and they plant, or they don't do anything and they plant. I think that's the biggest thing. And then the thing that I really felt was when we went to the moon. It was hard to understand that when that happened. But I see the world as it changed. I wonder how it can change another 100 years.
Okay, on our wedding, like we said, was June 15, 1954. I had to arrange it all, paid for it all out of my $200 a month check, and I had a nice wedding dress, and we were married in the church, but there was no elaborate receptions then or anything like that. We went down to the church basement for the reception and had cake and ice cream, and I paid for it all.
Well, one of the things I'd like to add to that is, now they have limousines and that. They took us in a manure spreader around town.
That was traditional. The manure spreader was brand new, but after you were married, it was traditional in the small town of Newcastle that the bride and groom and their attendants rode around town in the manure spreader.
And there was no drinking.
No.
The other thing that we did a little different at our wedding is after we were married, I picked the bride up and carried her out. When we could, when they had us come that back from being up the front. Well, Starr, you wanted to tell them about our experience when we went to Florida with our kids. And I can tell you it was January 10th is when we left here to go to Florida. And I think we spent about 10 days down there. We took Kim, Rhonda, Danny, Kirk, Holly
was 2.
She was 2, and then we took Denny along, Rhonda's boyfriend. I think one of the things we was right by the long bridge in St. Petersburg, and it was we could see that bridge from where we were staying. We stayed where the Cardinals have their spring training camp. One of the things that I always thought about and laughed was when Denny, he thought the water looked like it was about maybe a foot deep, so he stepped over in it and it went completely down. It must have been 6-7 feet, and he kept shooting out of there, and we were laughing so dang hard that he come out of there. They grabbed him and pulled him up on the shore. But it was a swimming pool. I remember that real well.
Yeah, it was always important for me that the kids had travel experience. So we did a lot of things. We went to Florida with the family for several years in a row, and then they also got to go to Disneyland. Kirk and the Holly did. I don't know if the rest of them did.
Well, the little ones did go to Florida. When our company paid for it, they had a time that they would take all the family, all expenses paid, and then, this is a lot of people. We would stay there, and they had Disney World. They had all their their people come over and entertain us at night. They walked around, and we had, what was some of their names? One was...
we had Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, and we had all the Walt Disney characters. They came around. That
was one of the trips that the company did pay for that one, though, but it was very nice.
And then we went to the Black Hills many times, and then we went up to the Wisconsin Dells, And then we also visited around with my sisters and brothers at various places, various states where they lived. But that was important to me, that the kids got to travel.
One of the things we didn't talk about was our honeymoon.
Yeah.
We went to Denver to start out with. I have a cousin that owned the Lucky Strike Motel. And so they put us up a night or two, and that's all we wanted to be in Denver. We went to Flagstaff, and then we went down to Albuquerque. She had a uncle down there, and he showed us the whole area and and he drove crazy, but we made it. And then when we come back, we stopped at Omaha with my uncle and stayed there a couple days. Then when we come home, as far as I know, that was the end of it. We come home, and that was the end of our honeymoon trip. But it was sure fun. And I had a brand new car when I was 16 years old, and it was a 1952 Ford Crown Vic.
And you got that from selling
corn.
Selling your own corn?
My own corn. I had a quarter of land that I worked in, 160 acres, and I made that much money, cleared that much money, and I bought me a brand new car. Always want to leave with anybody is to do your best, do it honest, and remember that the Lord is with you, and if you cross Him up, things are not good. So be a good Christian, be a good worker. The man who gets a lot of money in where you're working does not keep all that money. He pays a lot of bills and a lot of things. So keep in mind, as we have went through this whole years, that the best thing you can find is friendship and love.
One thing that I taught my kids when they were growing up is to work hard, to love God, and to do the very best in your job, whatever you did, to do your best job. And I still think that for all the future, those are the things that, to be good people and to go to church, love God, and just be the best that you can be.